He told me I was going to be the last one. That after me, he was done. Carol DaRonch was 18 years old when one of America's most prolific serial killers tried to abduct her from a shopping mall parking lot. She was supposed to be victim number 5. Instead, she became the one that got away. The one mistake Ted Bundy made. The survivor whose testimony would eventually help put him on death row. This is her story, and it's more terrifying than you can imagine. November 8th, 1974. Fashion Place Mall in Murray, Utah. A Friday evening during the holiday shopping season. The parking lot is busy. Families coming and going. The air filled with the promise of Thanksgiving just weeks away. Carol DaRonch, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, walks to her car carrying shopping bags. She doesn't notice the tan Volkswagen Beetle that's been circling the lot. She doesn't see the handsome man with the brown hair and charming smile watching her every move. She has no idea that in the next 30 minutes, she'll be fighting for her life against a man who has already killed at least 4 women. A man who would go on to confess to 30 murders, though the real number is likely much higher. But here's what makes Carol DaRonch's story so crucial. She survived. And not only did she survive, she fought back. She remembered details. She testified, and her courage helped expose one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. Today, we're going deep into that terrifying night. We're going to walk through every moment of Carol's encounter with Ted Bundy. We'll explore how he selected her, how he tried to manipulate her, and how she managed to escape when so many others didn't. But more than that, we're going to understand why Ted Bundy was so successful at what he did. How a serial killer operated in plain sight, using charm and manipulation to lure victims. And why Carol DaRonch's survival instincts saved her life. This is the story of the woman who escaped Ted Bundy. To understand what Carol DaRonch was up against, you need to understand Ted Bundy. Theodore Robert Bundy was not the monster you'd expect. He wasn't a loner hiding in the shadows. He wasn't obviously disturbed or socially awkward. In fact, he was the opposite. Ted Bundy was handsome, educated, and charming. He attended law school. He worked at a crisis hotline, ironically counseling people in distress. He volunteered for political campaigns. People liked him. Women were attracted to him. He seemed like the kind of guy you'd want your daughter to date. But beneath that polished exterior was something dark, calculated, and utterly remorseless. By November 1974, Ted Bundy had already killed multiple women in Washington state. His victims shared a similar profile. Young, attractive women with long dark hair parted in the middle. He targeted college campuses, parks, beaches, places where young women felt safe. His method was sophisticated. He would often wear a fake cast or use crutches, pretending to be injured. He'd approach women and ask for help carrying books to his car or loading something heavy. It was a brilliant manipulation. Who wouldn't help someone who appeared vulnerable? Other times, he'd impersonate authority figures. He'd flash a fake badge and claim to be a police officer. This is exactly what he did with Carol DaRonch. But here's what's truly chilling about Ted Bundy. He learned from his mistakes. He evolved. After each kill, he refined his technique, varied his approach, expanded his hunting grounds. By the time he reached Utah, he was at the peak of his predatory skills. He'd already murdered Linda and Healy in Seattle, abducting her from her bedroom. He'd killed Donna Gail Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Kathleen Parks, and Brenda Ball in Washington. In July 1974, he committed one of his most brazen acts, abducting 2 women, Janice Ott and Denise Naslund, from Lake Sammamish State Park in broad daylight, in front of witnesses. Witnesses at Lake Sammamish described a handsome man with his arm in a sling, asking women to help him load a sailboat onto his car. Multiple women refused, but Janice and Denise didn't. They were never seen alive again. After the Lake Sammamish murders, the heat was on. Police had composite sketches. Witnesses had seen his Volkswagen Beetle. Ted Bundy decided to relocate. He moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, in the fall of 1974 to attend law school at the University of Utah. New city, new hunting ground, new victims. On October 2nd, 1974, 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox disappeared from Holiday, Utah. Her body was never found. On October 18th, 17-year-old Melissa Smith, the daughter of a police chief, disappeared. Her body was found 9 days later in the mountains. She'd been raped, strangled, and beaten so severely her skull was fractured. On October 31st, Halloween night, 17-year-old Laura disappeared from a Halloween party in Lehi, Utah. Her body was found nearly a month later in American Fork Canyon. Like Melissa, she'd been beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled. Ted Bundy was accelerating. The time between kills was shrinking. The violence was escalating. And then came November 8th, the night he encountered Carol DaRonch. Carol DaRonch was an 18-year-old telephone operator living with her parents in Murray, Utah. She was an ordinary young woman living an ordinary life. On that Friday evening, she went to Fashion Place Mall to do some shopping. Around 6:30 p.m., Carol left Walden Books and walked toward her car, a Chevrolet Camaro parked in the lot. As she reached her vehicle, she noticed a man approaching her. He was well-dressed, wearing a sports jacket and patent leather shoes. He had dark hair, was clean-shaven, and had an attractive, trustworthy face. He identified himself as Officer Roseland of the Murray Police Department. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice polite and professional. "Someone tried to break into your car. Could you come with me to the mall office to fill out a report?" Carol was immediately confused. She looked at her car. Nothing seemed wrong. The doors were locked. The windows were intact. "Are you sure it was my car?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. A witness saw someone trying the door handle. We need you to come check if anything was taken and file a report." This is a crucial moment. Carol felt uneasy, but she couldn't articulate why. The man seemed legitimate. He knew the name of the local police department. He was well-dressed and spoke authoritatively. But something in her gut said this wasn't right. Still, like many young women of that era, Carol had been socialized to be polite, to trust authority, to not make a scene. So she agreed. They walked back toward the mall together. The man, Ted Bundy, kept up casual conversation. He asked where she worked, if she lived in the area, if she was in school. He was building rapport, making her feel comfortable, gathering information. When they reached the mall office, Bundy told Carol to wait outside while he checked if the detective was ready. He disappeared inside for a moment, then came back out. "The detective's not here yet. He said to meet him at the police station. Come on, I'll drive you." Now Carol's alarm bells were really ringing. "Why can't I just drive myself?" "Procedure," Bundy said smoothly. "We need to keep your car here as evidence until we process it for fingerprints." This was completely absurd, but Bundy delivered it with such confidence that Carol didn't immediately refuse. Instead, she hesitantly followed him to his car, a light blue Volkswagen Beetle. As they walked, Carol noticed several things that didn't add up. The man wasn't in uniform. He had no police radio. His car didn't look like a police vehicle. And when she got closer, she could see it was messy inside, with papers and items scattered across the back seat. But the most unsettling thing? The smell. Carol would later describe a strange, unpleasant odor coming from the car. We now know that Ted Bundy often transported bodies in that Volkswagen. Carol may have been smelling death itself. She got into the passenger seat. Bundy walked around to the driver's side and got in. He started the engine. "Where's the police station?" Carol asked. "Just up the road," Bundy replied. But as he drove, Carol realized they weren't heading toward the Murray Police Department. They were driving away from downtown, toward the outskirts of the city, toward darker, more isolated areas. "This isn't the way to the police station," Carol said, her voice rising with panic. "It's a substation," Bundy said calmly. "Relax." But Carol was done relaxing. Every instinct in her body was screaming that she was in danger. And then Ted Bundy pulled over on a dark, residential street. He put the car in park, and he reached across Carol's lap. She thought he was reaching for something in the glove compartment. Instead, he pulled out a pair of handcuffs. In one swift motion, he snapped one cuff around Carol's wrist. That's when she realized this wasn't a police officer. This was a predator, and she was about to become his next victim. The moment the handcuff clicked around her wrist, Carol DaRonch's survival instincts kicked in. She didn't freeze. She didn't comply. She fought. Ted Bundy lunged at her, trying to secure the other cuff, try to gain control. But Carol was strong, and she was terrified, and terror can give you strength you didn't know you had. She grabbed the door handle and pulled, trying to escape. Bundy grabbed her arm, yanking her back. They struggled in the confined space of the car, Carol screaming, Bundy grunting with effort, the handcuffs swinging wildly from her wrist. Bundy reached for something else. Carol caught a glimpse of it in the dim light, a crowbar. He swung at her head. Carol threw up her arm defensively. The crowbar connected with her skull, but not with full force. It was enough to stun her, to make her dizzy, but not enough to knock her unconscious. Blood trickled down the side of her face. But she didn't stop fighting. She clawed at his face with her free hand. She kicked at him. She screamed at the top of her lungs. And most importantly, she kept trying to get out of that car. Bundy was strong, but Carol was fighting for her life, and that made all the difference. In the chaos, Carol managed to get the passenger door open. She half fell, half jumped out of the car onto the street. The handcuff was still dangling from her wrist. Blood was running down her face. But she was out. She ran. Behind her, she could hear Bundy getting out of the car. He was chasing her. Carol ran down the dark street, screaming for help. Houses lined the road, but no one came out. No one opened their doors. She was alone, injured, and being pursued by a serial killer. And then, miracle of miracles, she saw headlights. A car was driving down the street toward her. Carol ran directly into the middle of the road, waving her arms frantically, the handcuff catching the light. The car screeched to a halt. Inside were Wilbur and Mary Walsh, a married couple who'd been out for a drive. Carol ran to their window, hysterical, bleeding, barely coherent. "Please help me. A man tried to kidnap me. Please." Wilbur Walsh looked past Carol and saw, in the distance, a man standing by a Volkswagen Beetle. The man was staring at them. And then, slowly, he got back into his car and drove away. The Walshes immediately drove Carol to the police station. The real police station. Carol gave a statement that night. She described her attacker. Late 20s, clean-cut, brown hair, about 5'10", wearing a patent leather shoes and a sports jacket. She described his car, a light blue Volkswagen Beetle with torn upholstery. But most importantly, she still had the handcuffs on her wrist. The police examined them. They were unusual handcuffs, not standard police issue. They were cheap, the kind you'd buy at an army surplus store. One cuff was fastened around Carol's wrist. The other was still open, meant for her other hand. If Bundy had succeeded in securing both cuffs, Carol DaRonch would have been completely helpless. She would have become another name on the list of Ted Bundy's victims. But she didn't. She fought. She escaped. And in doing so, she became the key witness that would eventually help bring Ted Bundy to justice. The same night Carol DaRonch escaped, just a few hours later, and only 20 miles away, another attack occurred. Deborah Kent, a 17-year-old high school student, disappeared from Viewmont High School in Bountiful, Utah. She'd been attending a school play with her parents. During intermission, she left to pick up her brother from the ice skating rink. She never made it to her car. Witnesses reported seeing a suspicious man in the parking lot that night, a man who matched Carol DaRonch's description. A strange man who'd entered the school auditorium during the play, then left quickly. In the parking lot where Deborah was last seen, police found a small key. Later analysis would prove that this key fit the handcuffs that Carol DaRonch was wearing. Ted Bundy had struck twice in one night. Carol escaped. Deborah Kent didn't. Her body has never been found. But Carol's report was now part of a growing investigation. Police in Utah, Washington, Oregon, and Colorado were beginning to connect the dots. Young women were disappearing at an alarming rate. The victims were similar in appearance. The circumstances were eerily consistent. The problem was they had no suspect, no name, just a vague description of a handsome man with a Volkswagen Beetle. Meanwhile, Ted Bundy continued killing. In January 1975, Karen Campbell disappeared from a ski resort in Snowmass, Colorado. Her body was found a month later, beaten and sexually assaulted. In March, Julie Cunningham vanished in Vail, Colorado. In April, Denise Oliverson disappeared in Grand Junction, Colorado. Bundy was crossing state lines, making it harder for investigators to connect the cases. But then on August 16, 1975, Ted Bundy made a mistake. Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Hayward noticed a Volkswagen Beetle driving erratically in a residential neighborhood in Granger, Utah at 2:30 in the morning. When Hayward attempted to pull the car over, it sped away, running stop signs before finally pulling over. The driver was Ted Bundy. When Officer Hayward searched the vehicle, he found handcuffs, an ice pick, a crowbar, a ski mask, rope, and trash bags. This was a murder kit. These are the tools Ted Bundy used to abduct, restrain, and kill his victims. Bundy was arrested for evading police and possession of burglary tools. He claimed the handcuffs were for personal reasons and that he'd found the other items in a dumpster. But Detective Jerry Thompson of the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office saw the report and something clicked. Handcuffs, Volkswagen Beetle, crowbar. He pulled up Carol DaRonch's case file. The descriptions matched. Thompson created a photo lineup that included Ted Bundy's driver's license photo along with photos of other men with similar features. He brought Carol in to look at the photos. Carol studied each photo carefully. When she reached Ted Bundy's picture, she paused. "This one looks similar," she said, "but I'm not completely sure. His hair was different that night." It wasn't a positive identification, but it was enough. Combined with the items found in Bundy's car and his proximity to multiple disappearances, Detective Thompson had probable cause. Ted Bundy was charged with the attempted kidnapping of Carol DaRonch. The trial began on February 23, 1976. It would be the first time Ted Bundy faced justice for his crimes. The trial of Ted Bundy for the attempted kidnapping of Carol DaRonch was a bench trial, meaning there was no jury, just Judge Stuart Hansen presiding. This was a critical moment. If Bundy was acquitted, he'd walk free, and more women would die. The prosecution's case rested heavily on Carol DaRonch's testimony. She would have to take the stand, face her attacker, and recount the most terrifying night of her life. On the witness stand, Carol was composed but emotional. She described the encounter in detail. The man who claimed to be a police officer, the ride in the Volkswagen, the handcuffs, the crowbar, the fight, her escape. Defense attorney John O'Connell tried to discredit her testimony. He pointed out that in the initial photo lineup, Carol hadn't made a definitive identification. He suggested she was mistaken, that her memory was faulty, that she was simply identifying someone who resembled her attacker. But Carol held firm. When asked if the man who attacked her was in the courtroom, she pointed directly at Ted Bundy. That's him. The prosecution also presented physical evidence. The handcuffs found on Carol matched the key found in the Viewmont High School parking lot where Deborah Kent disappeared. The items found in Bundy's car, handcuffs, crowbar, rope, matched the tools used in Carol's attack. Witnesses who saw Carol immediately after the attack testified about her condition. Terrified, bleeding, with a handcuff dangling from her wrist. The Walshes, the couple who rescued Carol, testified about finding her in the street, hysterical and injured, and seeing a man by a Volkswagen in the distance. But perhaps the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source, Ted Bundy himself. Bundy took the stand in his own defense. This was a calculated risk. He believed he was smarter than everyone in the courtroom. He believed his charm and intelligence would win over the judge. He was wrong. Under cross-examination, Bundy was evasive, arrogant, and unconvincing. When asked about the items found in his car, his explanations were absurd. Handcuffs? He found them. Ice pick? He used it to get into his apartment when he locked himself out. Ski mask? It was for skiing. The prosecutor pressed him. Isn't it true that these are tools used for abduction? Bundy's response. I suppose they could be used for that purpose, but that's not why I had them. Judge Hanson wasn't buying it. On March 1st, 1976, Judge Stuart Hanson delivered his verdict. The court finds the defendant, Theodore Robert Bundy, guilty of aggravated kidnapping, a first-degree felony. Ted Bundy was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. But this was just the beginning. While Bundy was incarcerated in Utah, investigators in Colorado were building a case against him for the murder of Karen Campbell. In 1977, Bundy was extradited to Colorado to stand trial for murder. And that's when things took an even more bizarre turn. During a court hearing in Aspen, Ted Bundy, acting as his own attorney, was allowed access to the law library. During a recess, Bundy jumped out of a second-story window and escaped. He was recaptured 6 days later, cold and exhausted in the mountains. But Bundy wasn't done. On December 30th, 1977, he escaped again, this time from his jail cell in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. He lost 30 pounds to squeeze through a small opening in the ceiling of his cell, crawled through the crawl space, and dropped down into the apartment of a jailer. He walked out the front door and vanished. This time, he made it much farther. Ted Bundy fled to Tallahassee, Florida, and within weeks, he would commit some of his most horrific crimes. In the early morning hours of January 15th, 1978, less than a month after his escape, Ted Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In approximately 15 minutes, Bundy attacked 4 women. He bludgeoned them with a log as they slept in their beds. 2 of them, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, died from their injuries. 2 others, Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, survived but were severely injured. Later that same night, just blocks away, Bundy broke into another apartment and attacked Cheryl Thomas, a dance student. She survived but suffered permanent hearing loss and serious injuries. 3 weeks later, on February 9th, 1978, Bundy committed his final murder, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. He abducted her from her school in Lake City, Florida. Her body was found 8 weeks later in a state park. She'd been sexually assaulted and murdered. On February 15th, 1978, Ted Bundy was pulled over for driving a stolen vehicle in Pensacola, Florida. When the officer ran his information, he discovered Bundy was a fugitive wanted for escape and murder. Ted Bundy's killing spree was finally over. He was charged with the Chi Omega murders and the murder of Kimberly Leach. Both trials were nationally televised, marking one of the first times Americans watched a serial killer's trial in real time. During these trials, Ted Bundy represented himself, cross-examining witnesses, making legal arguments, and addressing the jury. He seemed to enjoy the spotlight, the attention, the drama. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bite marks on Lisa Levy's body matched Bundy's dental impressions perfectly. Witnesses placed him at the Chi Omega house. Eyewitnesses saw him abducting Kimberly Leach. On July 24th, 1979, Ted Bundy was found guilty of the Chi Omega murders and sentenced to death. On February 10th, 1980, he was found guilty of murdering Kimberly Leach and sentenced to death again. Ted Bundy spent the next 9 years on death row, filing appeals, giving interviews, and eventually confessing to 30 murders across 7 states. The true number is almost certainly higher. Some investigators believe he killed over 100 women. On January 24th, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. He was 42 years old. Outside the prison, crowds gathered. Some held signs saying, "Burn, Bundy, burn." Others cheered when the announcement came that the execution had been carried out. But for the survivors and the families of his victims, there was no real closure. How could there be? Ted Bundy took so much from so many people. He destroyed families. He ended promising lives. He left a trail of trauma that still reverberates today. So, what happened to Carol DaRonch, the woman who started it all? After the trial, Carol largely disappeared from public life. She didn't want to be famous. She didn't want to be known as the woman who escaped Ted Bundy. She wanted to live her life, to move forward, to not be defined by the worst night of her life. And that's exactly what she did. Carol went on to marry, to have a family, to build a life. She rarely gave interviews. She avoided the media circus that surrounded Ted Bundy. She simply wanted to be left alone. But her impact cannot be overstated. Carol DaRonch's testimony was the first crack in Ted Bundy's facade. It was the first time he was held accountable for his actions. Her willingness to testify, to face her attacker in court, to relive her trauma in front of strangers, that took immense courage. Without Carol, Ted Bundy might have continued killing for years. Without her testimony, he might never have been convicted. Without her fight that night in the Volkswagen Beetle, she would have been another victim, another name on a list that was already far too long. Carol DaRonch saved her own life. But in doing so, she also saved the lives of countless potential future victims. So what can we learn from Carol's story? First, trust your instincts. Carol felt uneasy from the very beginning, but she second-guessed herself. She was taught to be polite, to trust authority, to not make a scene. Those social conditioning factors almost got her killed. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't worry about being rude. Your safety is more important than politeness. Second, fight back. Statistics show that women who resist during attempted abductions have a much higher survival rate than those who comply. Ted Bundy succeeded with victims who froze or complied. He failed with Carol because she fought like hell. If you're ever in a similar situation, fight. Scream. Run. Make noise. Draw attention. Most predators want an easy victim. If you make it difficult, they may give up. Third, details matter. Carol remembered specific details about her attacker and his vehicle. Those details helped police identify and eventually arrest Ted Bundy. If you witness something suspicious or survive an attack, try to remember, physical characteristics, clothing, vehicle make and model, license plate numbers, direction of travel, any distinguishing features. These details can be crucial to an investigation. Fourth, survivors are heroes. Carol DaRonch didn't ask to be attacked. She didn't do anything to deserve what happened to her. But when faced with evil, she survived. And then she had the courage to testify, to relive her trauma publicly, to help ensure her attacker faced justice. That's heroism. The story of Carol DaRonch and Ted Bundy is a reminder that monsters are real. They don't always look like monsters. They can be handsome, charming, educated, and seemingly normal. Ted Bundy used his appearance and charisma as weapons. He exploited social norms, our tendency to trust authority figures, our reluctance to be rude, our assumption that people who look normal are safe. But Carol saw through it, or at least, when it mattered most, she acted on her instincts even though she couldn't fully articulate why she felt uncomfortable. That saved her life. Ted Bundy confessed to 30 murders before his execution, but investigators believe the real number is much higher. Some estimates put it at over 100 victims across multiple states and possibly multiple countries. Each of those victims was someone's daughter, sister, friend. Each had dreams, plans, futures that were stolen from them. But Carol DaRonch survived. And her survival, her fight, her testimony, her courage, helped ensure that Ted Bundy would never kill again. In the decades since, Carol has lived quietly. She doesn't do interviews. She doesn't attend true crime conventions or appear in documentaries. She's simply a woman who survived something terrible and chose to move forward with her life. And that, in itself, is a powerful statement. She refused to let Ted Bundy define her. She refused to be a permanent victim. She survived, testified, and then lived. If you found this story powerful, let me know in the comments. What other survivor stories should I cover? Should I do Kara Robinson, who escaped the serial killer Richard Evenitz? Or maybe Jennifer Asbenson, who survived the truck stop killer? Let me know. And if you want to understand more about how predators operate and how to protect yourself, subscribe. Because knowledge is power, and awareness is the first line of defense. This was the story of Carol DaRonch, the woman who escaped Ted Bundy. She fought back. She survived. And she helped stop one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. Never forget her courage, and never ignore your instincts. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there.